I interviewed my friend Al about how she was able to buy her first property with a friend of hers.
I remember you telling me about 10 years ago now that you managed to save up a lot of money by sharing a bedsit with a friend, and you then went on to buy or to put down the deposit with that friend to buy a house. Have I remembered that correctly?
More or less, yes. We shared a bed sit. We didn't just share a bed sit. We shared a double bed within a bed sit.
Amazing.
It was
Beautiful.
a it was a one room bed sit by the seafront. But it was like a sort of the set of Steptoe and Son, and we had a sink, a nasty old TV from the YMCA that cost £30 with a grey. It was supposed to be colour, but it had a grey patch in it. And yes, we shared an old double bed for a year.
I love that you did that. Wow. So what first gave you the idea to share a bedsit with a friend?
Well, I think we'd just spent the summer working in Ireland, and we just came back, and we'd been doing a lot of sofa surfing at friends and things like that. And we were just absolutely, I think we were just knackered and just needed somewhere to stay immediately. And it was literally the first thing that sort of came up. And I suppose because we just knew each other so well by then anyway, it was better than the other options. And yes, it was so phenomenally cheap. I mean, even though it was 10 years ago. I think it would have been at the beginning of the 2000s, and it was something like £70 a week between us. Um, so yeah, you can save a lot of money like that. And I think it was a case of, well, this is temporary. We'll save money, but then I don't think we realised that temporary would turn into sort of over a year.
So for a year, you shared a small room and a bed with a friend of yours, and you saved all your money.
I saved a lot.
And what was the most challenging aspect of that?
Um,
Sharing a room and a bed with a friend.
it's a sort of rhetorical question, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
fair enough.
so what was so objectionable about sharing someone who's not your partner? Um, well, the funny thing is, it's like back in sort of Victorian times, that was perfectly normal, wasn't it? You'd have entire shifts of people. So there would be the day people who'd have the bed, and then the night people who'd have the bed. And bed was a very transient place. But no, we weren't quite that bad. No, the most objectionable thing was I don't think there was one single thing. I think actually the thing was the fact that it was a bed sit and there was a baby belling with only two rings, and I wanted to be a creative cook.
So were there any fun aspects to sharing a room, a small room and a bed with your friend for a year?
But I mean, I think it was just we lived in a house full of people doing very similar things. It was travelers, and other sort of transient people who were either saving money or just needed somewhere where they didn't have to sign contracts and stuff like that. So actually, the whole house had quite a good atmosphere, and it had sort of fun people in it. With the exception of one woman who was from New Zealand, who I don't know, she thought she was a healer, but she kind of, I don't know. She was basically a complete alcoholic, and what she used to like to do was wear these big swirly floral skirts, put loads of candles out, get absolutely twatted, and then dance around the candles in the swirly skirt while pissed. So the fact that Raywin was this constant fire risk did take the edge off me. But generally, the kind of characters that came through. I mean, it wasn't specifically sharing a room with Alice, no, but the whole sort of, I don't know, living in a sort of slightly tawdry down at heel house with other people being in the same situation was somehow fun.
So in hindsight, it was worth it. If you had to live your life again, you would do it.
Um, I think when you really got a goal in mind, it's surprising what you will make yourself do.
Absolutely. And you pulled it off. You ended up
Yeah.
buying a house with Alice, didn't you? So you told me 10 years ago that I was the only person who had applauded you for sharing a small room, I'll say it again, with a friend and a bed with a friend. And everybody else had said to you, how could you do that? And I think you rather liked that I liked that you'd done it.
Well, of course I would. I generally didn't admit it to most people. But
And
yeah, I think once it was in the past, I could admit it. And I think you're probably one of the few. Yeah, I can see why you would appreciate it, I suppose, having done similar things yourself. I mean, ultimately, as you say, we've now got flats and houses, etc. There's still quite a lot of people out there who haven't. I mean, there's a gap, isn't there? There's a big divide between people who own houses and people who don't. And of course, the people who sort of don't will say, oh, you're lucky. As if you've somehow just been gifted it. And I had this conversation recently, and I had to give a rundown of the things that I have done to do that. It's people who own places did not just sail into it.
so I want to ask you one last question. Do you have any advice for anyone who might be considering doing this?
The only, I mean, I don't think advice. No, I don't have advice because, in terms of there is a right thing or wrong thing to do. But for me, the thing that made me do it was realizing just how what a waste of time money rent is. And I think even now, paying a mortgage is even with interest rates rising, it's still more viable than paying rent. Rent is basically a poverty trap. So if you can possibly somehow afford it, you're probably still better off. I mean, I think back when I did it, I think our mortgage was between us about 500 or 600, and even back then to rent what we were buying would have cost us £1,100 a month. So I think that was what convinced me anyway. I think for anybody who's afraid of the commitment, the only thing you're committing yourself to is not being in a poverty trap, and it's just more viable somehow, and it will be in the end.
I wholeheartedly agree. That's excellent advice. Thank you very much, Al.
One of the things I feel passionately about is owning one's own home. If you want to own your own home, don't spend your salary on rent. There are many ways to live rent-free, and I talk about some of those ways in my book. Buy my book. The link's below.